Between 1974 and 2000, 6 women were killed in East Germany, France, and Spain by a German serial killer named Volker Eckert. Volker Eckert's obsession and lust for women started as a simple doll fetish behavior, which eventually escalated into a murder spree. Following these heinous acts, Volker Eckert was known as one of the world's most sadistic serial killers who terrorized Europe for 3 decades, mostly targeting sex workers. At this time, the question that lingered in the mind of everyone was, what motivated Volker Eckert to start committing these terrible crimes? How did he manage to dispose of the bodies without being detected? And most importantly, how did he manage to avoid getting caught by the police for 32 long years? Hello, and welcome to Maya's reality channel, where we bring you compelling true crime stories. From unsolved mysteries to notorious criminals, we leave no stone unturned as we navigate the dark corridors of real-life crimes. So don't forget to give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to stay updated as we upload new videos. Now let's get back to the story. Born on July 1st, 1959, in Plauen, Volker Eckert was the eldest of 3 siblings. His fascination with women's hair began innocently enough in 1968, at the tender age of 9, when he started obsessing over his sister's doll, which had long locks. Placing the doll in front of him, Volker would run his hands through its hair, experiencing a curious and unfamiliar sensation. As years went by, Volker continued to explore his sexual interest in hair with his sister's dolls and some of his mother's wigs stored in their attic. This unusual attraction labeled him as a trichophiliac, someone who gets aroused by hair, and this made him feel a bit uneasy. Experiencing puberty earlier than his peers in 1968 and 1969, Volker refrained from confiding in his classmates about his early developments. He feared being ridiculed and misunderstood if they knew about his early development and his unusual attraction to hair. His fear of ridicule and misunderstanding also made him keep his desires secret. Over time, his fixation on long, luxurious hair, which had initially begun with dolls and wigs during his childhood, drove him to seek out women who possessed similar traits. As Volker entered adolescence, his family life began to unravel. In the 1960s, his parents' marriage dissolved, and his mother expelled his father from their apartment, casting shadows of turmoil over his teenage years. The upheaval deeply wounded him, especially his father's departure from the household. Volker swore off marriage to avoid a similar fate, determined not to endure the heartache of abandonment. Despite siding with his father, he continued to live under his mother's roof. However, he began to rebel, with one incident involving taking his parents' car for a joyride. Upon returning home, he faced serious consequences for his actions. In the early 1970s, Volker's obsession with his scenario intensified, to the point where he even included his dolls in it. This behavior stemmed from his belief that no woman would allow him to touch her hair, leading him to exaggerate his fantasies and actions. On May 7, 1974, Volker Eckert visited Sylvia Unterdorfel, his 14-year-old classmate. Sylvia was a pretty young girl who had beautiful hair, just as Volker liked them to be. Knowing that Sylvia's parents were not home, Volker lured her into the attic and took the chance to live out his sexual fantasies on her. He played with her hair and then began to strangle her with a curtain cord. Despite Sylvia's resistance, Eckert tightened his grip until she succumbed to her injuries. Afterward, he continued to stroke her hair and later staged the scene to appear as if Sylvia had taken her own life by hanging a cord around her neck and on the doorknob. Even though Sylvia's stepfather was a police officer who was sure the girl had not killed herself, knowing it was almost impossible to see how the girl could possibly have hanged herself from a doorknob, the file was closed. In 1975, despite working alongside his father as a painter, Eckert roamed the streets of Plauen at night, searching for what he deemed suitable women. In 1977, at the age of 18, Eckert was caught in the act of strangling a woman on the street, leading to his arrest. He received an 8-month jail sentence for this sexual assault. During his incarceration, Eckert admitted to Dr. Nidopol that he felt relieved to be apprehended, knowing that the police had his DNA and hoping that it would deter him from committing a similar offense in the future. He was later released from prison in 1978 at the age of 19. After his release, Volker Eckert began attacking around 30 different women in the dark streets of Plauen between 1979 and 1987. During these incidents, Volker Eckert grabbed or squeezed the necks of his victims during the attacks, rendering them unconscious. After his parents died, Eckert attempted to distract himself by caring for his younger sister and brother. He even admitted to his psychiatrist that this was the only valid thing in which he succeeded. Soon after, Eckert's siblings were taken to live with their aunt as his mental state continued to deteriorate over the next 8 years. In April 1987, a murder occurred in Plauen. The lifeless body of 18-year-old Heike Wunderlich was discovered in the woods, strangled and stripped naked. However, the murder of Wunderlich was presumed unrelated to Eckert's assaults, since the victim was killed. Subsequently, the case was closed without further investigation, and Eckert was never arrested for it. At the end of 1987, Eckert committed another violent assault, targeting a teenage girl named Claudia. That fateful evening, 16-year-old Claudia was walking through the streets of Plauen when Eckert spotted her and began to follow her discreetly. He approached Claudia and suddenly attacked her, resulting in a struggle during which he strangled her and then stroked her hair. Eckert later fled the scene after rendering her unconscious. Upon regaining consciousness, Claudia recounted the terrifying ordeal, recalling how she survived an attack that nearly took her life. She had been on her way home from a party with a friend when she decided to walk the rest of the way alone. However, she soon noticed someone following her, matching her pace no matter how fast or slow she walked. Feeling threatened, Claudia clutched her keys, hoping to defend herself if needed. Suddenly, at a crossroads, her assailant pushed her to the ground and began choking her. Despite her attempts to fight back, Claudia was overpowered. She described the pain and pressure as brutal and incredibly violent, feeling as though her life was slipping away. Miraculously, Claudia survived the attack and was able to provide a detailed description of her attacker to the police. When this drawing was shared, Dr. Nidopol saw it and recognized the man as Volker Eckert, age 28, whom he had examined before. Knowing that Eckert had a history of assault, Dr. Nidopol warned the Plauen police station. Subsequently, Eckert was arrested for the attempted murder of Claudia and was remanded in custody pending further legal proceedings. Eckert, then 29 years old, went to trial in 1988 for the attempted murder of Claudia. He was found guilty and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Eckert's time behind bars offered limited therapeutic intervention. Barely 6 years after his incarceration, Eckert was deemed fit by a psychologist to rejoin society. In July 1994, Eckert was freed from prison after serving 6.5 years behind bars. Once released, Eckert wasted no time in seeking out the woman who had played a pivotal role in putting him behind bars. One night, he appeared at Claudia's doorstep, clad in a boiler suit, claiming there was a burst pipe that required immediate attention. However, Claudia, who had a peephole in her door, recognized him and refused to open up. She knew he was determined to find her, but she couldn't fathom what his intentions were. Thankfully, she escaped unscathed, but she remained certain that Eckert intended to attack again. By 1999, at the age of 40, Eckert had secured a job as a long-distance truck driver, a role that aligned disturbingly well with his sinister inclinations. Truck driving afforded him the perfect cover to operate under the radar for extended periods. Working unsupervised and unaccountable to anyone, Eckert had ample time during his long journeys to indulge in his dark fantasies. These prolonged periods of solitude allowed his twisted thoughts to fester and evolve into disturbing realities. This job enabled Eckert to commit his crimes without drawing immediate suspicion. Truck drivers often traverse vast distances across different jurisdictions, making it easier for Eckert to dispose of his victims' bodies in areas far removed from where he picked them up. This practice, known as linkage blindness, often confounds police investigations as they struggle to connect the disparate pieces of evidence scattered across various regions. As a result, Eckert was able to operate without facing any form of consequences, evading detection for his heinous acts. His victims were mainly sex workers who operated in various countries between 2001 and 2006. Between June 25, 2001, and November 2, 2006, a series of gruesome events unfolded across Western Europe, leaving communities in a state of shock and fear. Eckert, now a truck driver, roamed the highways, his sinister intentions hidden beneath the guise of his profession. In 2001, in Chermignac, near Bordeaux, France, a 21-year-old Nigerian sex worker named Sandra Osifo became a victim of Eckert's brutality. He selected her due to her long hair, which he later discovered was a wig. Eckert strangled her, conducted amateur postmortems, and photographed her lifeless body. He then severed her hair, dressed her corpse, and kept it in the cab of his truck as a macabre trophy. 4 days later, her body was discovered in a ditch by the road 90 kilometers north, with her Spice Girls pendant still loosely around her throat. Police in August of 2001, in Catalonia, Spain, a 24-year-old sex worker named Isabel Beatriz Diaz was also killed by Eckert in Lloret de Mar, a popular tourist town on the northeast coast. He later confessed to police that when he started to strangle her in the cab of the lorry, even though she fought back with great strength, Eckert had sex with her and killed her, performing amateur postmortems and photographing her body before cutting off her hair and dressing her corpse. The victim's remains were kept in the cab of Eckert's truck, serving as a grim reminder of his depravity. He later threw her body from the cab near the motorway junction at Mahanet de la Selva. Isabel's body was later found 2 months after her death. In August 2002, a 23-year-old sex worker from Sierra Leone met her demise in Troyes, France, at the hands of Eckert. The bustling streets of Europe bore witness to yet another senseless act of violence. Although Eckert never confessed to this, he was slated to have been driving in the area at the time because he withdrew money with his credit card in Troyes just before she was picked up. As the years passed, Eckert's reign of terror continued unabated. In Catalonia, Spain, a Russian sex worker became his next victim. Once again, Eckert followed his chilling routine, strangling the woman, performing amateur postmortems, and photographing her body. He then cut off her hair and dressed her corpse, storing it in the cab of his truck alongside his previous victims. Then, on September 5, 2004, a 25-year-old Ghanaian sex worker became another victim of Eckert's brutality, this time in Rezzato, Italy. Her tragic fate served as a grim reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. As the years passed, 4 other women met similar fates, with 3 in the Czech Republic and 1 in France, according to police reports from those countries. Their lives were tragically cut short by the same sinister force that haunted the highways of Europe. In October 2006, a 28-year-old Polish sex worker in Reims, France, met a gruesome end at the hands of Eckert. He repeated his sickening rituals, strangling the woman, performing amateur postmortems, and photographing her body. Eckert then proceeded to cut off her hair and dress her corpse, adding her to the collection of victims in the cab of his truck. Finally, on November 2, 2006, a 20-year-old Bulgarian sex worker in Hostalric, Catalonia, Spain, became Eckert's last known victim. Once again, he followed his chilling routine of strangling the woman, performing amateur postmortems, and photographing her body. Eckert then cut off her hair and dressed her corpse, adding her to the grim collection stored in the cab of his truck. Eckert kept notes about each crime on the back of his Polaroid pictures, ensuring he could remember the details of each attack later on. Additionally, he stored the prostitute's hair in small plastic bags after cutting it off during the crimes. He also held on to items of clothing from his victims, although the owners of some of these items remain unidentified to this day. Throughout his reign of terror, Eckert's depravity knew no bounds as he meticulously carried out his gruesome rituals, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Eckert's chilling spree of violence extended far beyond his known victims. Authorities suspect he committed at least 7 additional murders across Europe. After the brutal murder on November 2, 2006, footage captured by a surveillance camera revealed Eckert's truck parked next to the lifeless body of his victim, abandoned beside a desolate parking lot. This footage was particularly notable as the camera had been installed by someone who had recently begun installing CCTV cameras in the area. As a test, one of the cameras panned, capturing Eckert's truck among its images. The grisly scene immediately caught the attention of the Catalan police, the Mossos d'Esquadra. With the truck acting as a crucial lead, authorities swiftly launched a thorough investigation. Their efforts bore fruit when, a few weeks later, German police apprehended Eckert in Wesseling, a town near Cologne, on November 17, 2006. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community, as the facade of a seemingly ordinary truck driver gave way to the revelation of a heinous serial killer. Upon searching Eckert's truck and residence, police made horrifying discoveries. Tufts of hair, reminiscent of his victims, were found alongside chilling photographs depicting various forms of torture inflicted upon his prey. The evidence uncovered painted a disturbing picture of Eckert's depravity and the extent of his crimes. What immediately stood out was that the killer was a fetishist, meaning he kept souvenirs from his crimes, such as locks of hair, as if they were treasures. This behavior is unusual in European crime stories and is more akin to something you'd see in movies. He essentially created a collection of mementos, which is common among serial killers. These items served multiple purposes for him. They allowed him to relive his crimes and feel powerful and in control again, while also acting as a stimulus to commit similar acts in the future. Most criminals dispose of evidence that could link them to their victims, but he kept everything, which is highly unusual in criminal cases. During interrogations, Eckert coldly confessed to the heinous acts, admitting to the murders of 6 individuals. Among his victims were 5 sex workers whose lives were brutally cut short in France and Spain, as well as that of Sylvia Unterdorfel, his classmate back in Germany. The revelation sent shockwaves through the communities affected by Eckert's reign of terror, leaving them grappling with the unimaginable horrors that had unfolded right under their noses. As the investigation continued, authorities delved deeper into the twisted mind of this remorseless killer, unraveling the chilling details of his crimes and the sinister motives that drove him to commit such unspeakable atrocities. On his 48th birthday, July 1, 2007, Eckert knew that he would be officially charged with murder within the next few days. However, nobody came to see him that day. Neither his sister nor his brother visited. The weight of the pending charges and the gravity of the accusations against him likely weighed heavily on his mind. It became too much to bear. As prosecutors sought to understand Eckert's psyche, he underwent assessment by forensic psychologist Professor Norbert Natopil. During their long talks, there were mixed emotions from Eckert: sadness, fear, and even laughter, revealing that Eckert was more complex than merely a cruel killer. Alone in his cell on the night of his birthday, Volker Eckert made a tragic decision. The following morning, his lifeless body was discovered hanging from the bars in his cell in Bayreuth, Bavaria, on July 2, 2007. He had taken his own life, bringing what he believed to be justice upon himself during the night. This sudden and tragic turn of events not only marked the end of Eckert's life, but also left many unanswered questions surrounding the motivations behind his actions and the circumstances leading to his demise. In December 2007, 5 months after his death, police closed the file on Volker Eckert, marking the end of a Europe-wide investigation. However, during interrogation, Eckert could recall many of his crimes in great detail, suggesting a potentially sensational trial that would have garnered international media attention. It is believed that Eckert may have committed more murders than he admitted, with estimates ranging up to 22 victims across Europe. His relentless and successful evasion of police attention left a lasting shadow over the lives of both his victims and those who narrowly escaped. Eckert's actions branded him as a predatory serial killer devoid of remorse, whose death ultimately denied justice to the families of his victims. Alright guys, that wraps up our video. If you found this video informative, please give us a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to stay updated as we upload new videos.